In this video, I'm back to work on my 2012 JKU Rubicon. I'm going to be going into Driveshafts, why I went with an aftermarket set, and how it compares to stock. We're going to talk 1350 versus 1310. I'm going to get into some upgrades and repairs this Jeep needed, and also show you a very budget-friendly way to make your hardtop look new again. All right, let's get to it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is Driveshafts, stock versus aftermarket, 1310 versus 1350, and when is it a good time to go ahead and upgrade Driveshafts. Now, the last video I focused on this Jeep, I had a set of 488 differential gears installed at my local off-road shop, Low Range 4x4. At the same time, I had a set of 1350 series double cardan joints from Revolution Gear and Axle installed. So let's talk about the front drive shaft first, because there's a lot to unpack, and it's typically the one that's recommended the most, because a lot of suspension manufacturers will say if you're going to go over 3 inches, you need an aftermarket front drive shaft. And that typically comes down to a few reasons. Number one, clearance. Clearance not only for the exhaust, but for the front cross member. The original stock drive shaft is a pretty large OD, whereas most aftermarket ones, like mine for example, are comprised of a 2-inch 120 wall piece of tubing, so it's a lot smaller, which is going to help you with not only ground clearance but the other clearances that you need, but it's going to be much stronger as well. So if you do happen to hit it off-road, it's going to be a bit more durable. Now, what's a challenge with going with that double cardan 1350 like I did? Well, you can experience driveline vibration a lot easier, especially when you get with taller lifts. And this is because you've got sort of some compounding angles happening. The transfer case actually kicks the CV a bit up, and then it has to drop back down to the differential. And when you get kind of with a taller lift, the issue is you really want positive caster to make the Jeep drive well, but the pinion starts to point down, and now you've got these conflicting angles, and that can create driveline vibration. Now, the factory Roseppa style joint does a great job at masking this vibration, and there's some big advantages to that. The problem is, as that Roseppa style joint gets at a more extreme angle, it weakens it in the cage, and it's not going to be as durable. This is also one of the reasons why when people go with aftermarket housings like a Dynatrac Pro Rock 44, those housings are actually rotated up just a touch to help allow you to get more positive caster and reduce that angle on the drive shaft, so it lessens the driveline vibration. Now, this Jeep only has 2.5 inches of lift. I'm not really getting any driveline vibration with that, so that's not really a big issue. You typically see that as more of an issue once you get over 3 inches of lift. Now, one thing that is worth noting on this particular yoke combo that I ended up with, it did position the 1350 joint where it was contacting the shifter cable, so we had to trim a little bit off of that. Beyond that, it bolted right in place and there wasn't an issue. Now, the rear shaft is one that often gets replaced second. It's typically not as necessary, at least in a suspension aftermarket scenario, as a front shaft. I wanted to go ahead and have something a little bit more durable. You have a pretty long drive shaft when you have a 4-door JK, so it's definitely more exposed. Now, why go with a 1350 over a 1310? Now, the obvious thing here is 1350 is stronger. There is some debate as to whether you get more degree deflection and operating angle out of a 1310 over a 1350. I've seen some driveline manufacturers say, well, a 1310 is capable of 28 degrees and a 1350 is capable of 32 degrees. So we're kind of splitting hairs of 4 degrees, which could be important in some scenarios. My experience is what I leaned on when I picked a 1350 drive shaft, and I think that's important to consider. This is not my first JK. In fact, it's my 5th one that spans from when these things first came out in 2007, and I've had a couple of JKs that have had 1310 series double cardan joints, and I've had one with a 1350 driveline set. And here's what I will say. The one with the 1350 driveline ultimately ended up with 14 inches of vertical wheel travel with a suspension kit from a company called Evo Manufacturing. And I took that Jeep to Moab, JK, I think 3 JK experiences, Ultimate Adventure, all over the place. Never had an issue with binding, never had an issue with drive shaft failure, CV issue, anything. They were bulletproof. The ones that had the 1310s, I ended up replacing a front drive shaft because the double cardan joint wore out, and the one that had the 1310 in the rear actually shattered it climbing up a ledge, which is partially driver error, but it overloaded, it exploded, and I wasn't able to, there was no drive shaft shop even anywhere close to where I was to get it repaired, so I had to trailer the Jeep and then order a shaft. It was a whole thing. And I get that the school of thought with many people is, well, if you get a 1310 and it fails, it's going to fail before something more expensive or more catastrophic in the powertrain. You're not going to break your pinion. You're not going to break maybe an axle shaft. Oh, that's my fusible link. And I understand that perspective. I just don't subscribe to it. And in my experience, I just would rather go ahead and have the stronger thing. And if I do break a pinion, that means I have stepped this Jeep outside of where the factory limitations of, and I need to upgrade. And if that means I need to go with a heavier duty axle, or I need to step up to a chromoly axle shaft or whatever that is, I would rather upgrade than constantly have to repair and replace this fusible weak link. That's my perspective on it. How does this compare to the factory driveline in terms of shock load and things like that? I am not a factory drive shaft hater, I guess. I think that they work really well, and I've had unbelievably good experience with them, especially in the modern like JT and JL platforms. I just think that it's a little bit better Resepa than what came in the JK. And if this Jeep was a brand new JK and maybe I wasn't doing gears, or maybe thought, well, I'll just do the gears later, and I knew the drive shafts were going to be good, maybe I would pause and say, you know what, maybe I'll get the drive shafts later. But this thing is not a daily driver. It is basically an off-road toy at this point, and I want to make sure that it's as durable as it can be for going off-road. And that's what aftermarket drive shafts are really there for. The factory drive shafts simply smooth out driveline vibration or potential much better, but they're not stronger, they're not really more durable. So if you're really building your Jeep to have something that's going to be more durable for off-road, it makes sense to get aftermarket drive shafts, period. So that's my take on that, and that's why I went with aftermarket ones. You might notice as well, the gas tank skid plate looks brand new. That's because it is. The original one wasn't that bad, but it had a rust hole in it that was just bugging the heck out of me. So I had Low Range go ahead and swap that out while it was in there on the lift. One other thing I will talk about drive shafts is that this particular situation is a little unique in that this AEV lift doesn't come with aftermarket control arms, and I'm not really experiencing any driveline vibrations, which I kind of thought I would. The caster numbers are not great on this. It really needs adjustable arms to get this thing dialed in, but it just doesn't drive that bad, so I haven't messed with it at this point. I probably will end up just doing a different suspension kit eventually. But it is worth noting that if you do go with an aftermarket drive shaft, typically you want to make sure the Jeep does have adjustable control arms so you can dial in that pinion. So if you do experience any driveline vibration, you should be able to adjust it out to the best you can. Sometimes you're going to be fighting, especially if you have a taller lift and the axle is factory. It's really hard sometimes to get all of that vibration out, and this is really going to be something to experience that's interstate speed, so speeds above 65 miles an hour. Now, another thing that was replaced at the same time were the front axle shafts. I did not realize how bad a shape they were in until we pulled the front axle apart. So I ordered a new set from Revolution Gear and Axle. These are the 4340 series. They are a complete chromoly replacement axle shaft set for the JK44. I opted for the HDU joint, which is slightly more expensive, but it's a low maintenance joint that provides you with a 1350 needle bearing U joint, which is built with a 4340 chromoly cross. This is not only significantly stronger than stock, but you can operate it at higher steering angles, which is definitely a bonus. Another area that I knew was worn was the factory tie rod bar. The joints along with the adjuster sleeve had play, so I took this opportunity to upgrade instead of simply repair and replace. As I've mentioned in previous videos, this JK came with a drag link flip already installed, so I didn't have to address that, but I did decide to swap out the track bar bracket with this one from Steer Smarts. There are included sway bar relocation tabs as well to move up the factory sway bar links. Replacing the original lower bar is a Yeti XD tie rod bar. The bar itself is a major upgrade in terms of strength over stock, and it includes massive 2.5 ton JK spec ball joints that can be greased. What I really like about this bracket is that it comes with tabs already mounted to relocate the steering stabilizer above the tie rod bar. This helps tremendously to keep it out of harm's way off-road. My steering feels much tighter even with reusing the stock stabilizer, and if I ever decide to move up to a hydraulic assist system, I'll be able to retain this upgrade, so it's money well spent. I do want to talk about something that's super important and wildly overlooked, and that is air pressure, specifically air pressure when you are running a much larger tire. Now I'm running a 37 by 1250 R17 Nitto Trail Grappler. It's mounted on a 17 by 9 ATX slab bead lock with 3.5 inches of back spacing. I love this combo. It looks great under the Jeep. The Trail Grapplers roll smooth and quiet down the highway. They work phenomenal off-road, but it is worth noting that this is a load range D tire that's capable of supporting over 3,500 pounds at its max 50 psi, which is wildly overkill for this lightweight JK. So that means you have to adjust the tire pressure if you want to get the best ride quality out of the Jeep. For something like this, I'm running 28 psi in the front and 25 psi in the back. That's my street pressure, and that is a perfect setup for this thing to balance out performance and ride quality. Now you might think, man, 25 seems really low. Well, here's something to consider. Air pressure is progressive. So if we know that at max pressure, this tire can support over 3,500 pounds, and we cut that in half at 25 psi, that means I'm still supporting over 1,700 pounds per tire. Multiply that by 4 and you're still way beyond the gross vehicle weight rating that this JK has. If you're concerned about having a TPMS warning light, there are aftermarket modules like the JK Blaster from Z Automotive that you can delete the TPMS entirely or lower the threshold. I've got an AEV ProCal and I've just deleted the TPMS altogether, so I've got no warning lights, no TPMS sensors in these wheels altogether. Now, one thing you might notice is that the soft top is now off and I'm back to my hardtop, but before I installed the hardtop, I actually painted it both on the inside and the out. I was super nervous about doing this because I didn't want to spray paint it here in the shop, so I actually roll painted it. I used this Krylon flat black. I used a 4-inch roller and a brush. I just went to town. I did do some light prepping on it, some light sanding, wiped everything down with acetone, tried to get any oils or any gunk off of it as best I could. And yeah, it's got 3 coats on the outside, 3 coats on the inside, and it's not perfect, but it's so much better than it was, and I am very happy with it. It doesn't have as much of a sheen as the factory top, but this top was so faded on the top. As soon as I put this first coat down, I was like, wow, it was night and day. So $40 maybe, and you know, a little bit of sweat equity. You could probably do all the coats in just a couple of days. I kind of paced it out, but it really, I'm stoked on it. I love how the black looks on the inside. To me, it really cleaned it up, and the fact that I gave it, I think, a good amount of time between painting it and then putting it on, I haven't really got a lot of odors or anything like that. And you're sitting in the sun, it doesn't really seem like it like smells weird or anything. So I'm stoked on it. So if you're looking for a very inexpensive way to redo your hardtop, this Krylon flat, man, it covers really well, and I think, like I say, maybe $40, $45 in materials and just a little bit of sweat equity. So yep, hardtop is back on. Well, that's it for this video. If you do have any questions, just drop them in the comments. And if you want to see some more stuff I've got going on behind the scenes, you can check me out at all social media at Ollie Mansour Editor. As always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope to see you on the trail. Take care.